Hello and welcome to this edition of the Hess World podcast. I'm in conversation today with Pip White. Hello, Pip. Welcome.
Martin, thank you.
I've known Pip for a long time. Pip was part of my sales team back, I don't know, probably 20 years ago.
Yeah, 25, 20 years ago.
And I'm sure, we'll talk a little bit about that. So I've known Pip a long time, but Pip's gone on to bigger and better and greater things since then. So her career has now taken her to Salesforce, where she rose to be Senior Vice President of various parts of the business. Went to Google, where you were Managing Director of the Google Cloud business for UK and I. So a fantastic career. And I want to talk to you about where it all began and your journey through your career. And let's focus on, what worked for you, what didn't, culture, leadership style, influences on your career, and anything
in between.
Anything in between, because I know you're a Manchester United fan, which I particularly like because my team, Brighton, we always beat you, which is great.
You do, yeah.
Right, so now you're from up north. You live in Cheshire, posh. I call that posh up north, Cheshire. Yeah. So take us back to your childhood. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so always lived in Cheshire, still do now. Mum and dad, my dad was an entrepreneur, so had his own business. And two elder brothers, quite a big age gap between the two of us, the three of us even. So there's 11 and 13 years between my brothers. So always kind of looked up to, metaphorically and physically, up to my brothers. But yeah, had a great childhood. Went to boarding school. Some stories there in Wales, but
God, that's a double negative. Apologies to our Welsh viewers.
Well, my parents are Welsh, so they might not like that either.
My wife's Welsh as well. That's why I can say it.
But yeah, very happy childhood. Lots of great memories, and being led by a fantastic mum who was working hard in the family unit, and a dad who was very much an entrepreneurial spirit.
So a work ethic, strong work ethic
I'd say so,
in the family, and a lot of love.
Yes. Yeah,
where was the boarding school in Wales then?
Denby, which is where my mum is from, and where my parents got married. Actually,
okay.
Yeah. So I have mainly good memories of that.
Have you got a soft spot for Wales, or do you just sort of hate the place?
No, I do, because we only live about 10, 12 miles out from North Wales border, so that tends to be where we kind of head off to. If we're going to go to the beach, that'll be where we go.
You should come down to Brighton.
I know, it's a bit further for me.
Pebbles might upset you. But so you went to University of Manchester, very good university.
I did.
Business there?
I did business studies, but I studied at night school. I didn't do the traditional go off to university for 3 years because I basically wanted to earn some money straight away. So left boarding school at 16, did a sort of HND at the time.
Did you leave of your own accord?
They kind of suggested that was the time to leave. So yeah, didn't get expelled, but it was kind of a mutual
We've done
agreement.
As much for you as we could possibly
We've reached
do.
your potential, yeah. And that was quite a big culture shock, actually. All girls, insular, North Wales boarding school to a college in Crewe. It was a bit of a culture shock, if I'm being honest. So I did a BTEC National in business studies there, highly encouraged by my dad to keep my education going. Yeah. I was less inclined to, sort of fall into that, mainly because boarding school was very academic and I was very sporty. So I wanted to focus more on like my love of tennis and swimming.
Okay, didn't know you liked tennis.
Yeah, big paddle tennis player now.
Oh, well,
yeah. It's less demanding on the knees, if I'm being honest. But yeah, so I got a job in the job centre of, showing my age now. I went into the job centre, looked on the job centre board, found basically a junior job in an advertising agency, which was a very glam way of saying 4 or 5 people. But they were doing great work. They were working in places like the Cannes Film Festival. They were doing all sorts of kind of exhibitions at the time, which was very much,
glam.
So I got lots of exposure and I learnt loads, but I got them to sponsor me through night school at Manchester to do my BA honours in business studies with marketing. as a sort of side
Well done.
project. Yeah, so it was good because I wanted to have my own money and buy a car and do those sort of things. But I also, through my dad, I decided that I should get my degree really. So that's what I did.
In that agency, were you on the creative side or the sales side?
I was an account manager, so more on the customer-facing sales side than I'm not a drawer or anything like that.
So was because although you've been in GM, general management roles, like me, your functions you come up through is sales. Was sales that you sort of didn't know anything about and then sort of found about it? So you weren't sort of 12 and you thought, I want to be in sales.
No, and actually the step into, I joined another larger agency after that in Warrington that were more focused in tech. So their customers were JD Edwards, SAP, Nokia.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of an accidental trip into technology, but I just was fascinated by the fast pace and change of it all and also the impact it could have on the world. So, I was still not necessarily in a sales role, although I was very customer facing. I was still doing this kind of account manager role. And one of my customers, I can remember her calling me to this day, and she said, why are you still doing this role? You should be in tech and sales. And I had this, no, I could never.
Was this your first influence?
She was a really strong influence. Yeah, she was my customer marketing director in.
Should we give her a plug? What was her name?
Catherine Howarth, her name was. She was a marketing director in JD Edwards at the time, which were bought by PeopleSoft.
We'll send this podcast to her.
I will send it to her, yeah. No, she was. I remember the conversation now.
Fantastic.
And she could clearly see something in myself I couldn't see or just didn't have the confidence to see. And so that was that, really.
It's wonderful, isn't it?
Yeah.
Then a big change in your career. You joined the great HP.
Yeah, and another sort of shout out to my first boss there was Carol Watt, who you might remember from OpenView. She ran the marketing team there. She's now at Microsoft, I think. And I had this great conversation with her where I was joining the marketing team because that was my background and my experience. But I said to her, look, I really want to I want to have a go at sales. So I know you haven't yet employed me.
Was this down at Amen Corner in Bracknell?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, we just had this conversation. I said,
coming south. Whoa.
Well, I said to her, and she was really, and I'll forever be grateful to her. She was like, I totally get it, and you should follow your dreams, but give me a year and do the sales school at night, independent of your day job. Go through the sales school program. 2004, yeah. Go through that program, and I will support you and encourage you and be there. She'd also done sales background.
HP had bought Compaq by that stage.
That was the year. It just happened, like end of 2003 into 2004. So it was a very sort of disruptive time at HP. And actually, the sales school, of course, was where you and I first met.
Yes.
Many stories on that one.
Yes, we could. Well, yeah, we can talk about that in a minute. But so, because B2B selling is not really well known by people outside our world. And it's a fantastic, sales in the tech world. What a fantastic career it's been for me, and is still going on for you. But what made you think, it's sales rather than marketing?
If I'm going to be answering it really honestly, it's money. It was money. It was just about, I want to earn the most amount of money that I can. I was in my early 20s, right?
Yeah.
So I was motivated primarily by all the kind of aesthetic things in life. I wanted a great car. I wanted
Christine
to buy a new house.
Shoes. And all
that's not my thing. But but Gucci trainers, then that's my love language. But I just wanted to build some independence.
Everybody out there, if you want to get on Pip's good side,
I haven't got them on today,
Gucci trainers. Okay.
Yeah. Some people who might watch this will laugh because they know that of me. But I just wanted to. I wanted to have like a bit of wealth creation and see how far.
I'll be honest, that's why I got into it as well. Many years before you did, but early 80s. I was in marketing. I went from uni to a graduate trainee in Imperial Foods, which actually ended up in Golden Wonder. Launching the latest flavour of Ringo's, and seriously, and I just read an article in the paper, a day in the life of a Burroughs computer salesman.
Yeah.
And I was earning like $4,500 a year,
Yeah.
and this guy was earning $25,000 a year. This was 1982, and I thought, I want some of that. Exactly the same thing, and it seemed quite appealing actually, selling solutions to clients' problems.
Absolutely.
Same thing.
The big motivator for me was the sales school program. Like, basically, HP and IBM had the best, and you worked in both. They had the best reputation for developing salespeople into the cream of the crop. And so I'm being facetious by saying it was money, but I'm a lifelong learner. I love to always kind of think about my own development. Even like in the latter parts of my career, I'm always thinking about how can I improve? How can I progress? There's loads of things I still don't know. And that sales school program has such a great profile that I was like, I really want to get onto that, because if I can get onto that, I think that could be a springboard into my future career, and also a bit of like, I can prove to myself I can actually do this, versus someone saying, I think you'd be great in this.
Yeah, and you probably thought, but I just don't want to wing it. There is there is stuff I think to this job that I need to learn.
Yeah.
What was the so you're talking about 04. I'd still say the industry was still a bit. It was coming to the end of what I call the Wild West days of a very, very alpha male. Particularly in the sales front end. I think it was a very alpha male, and so I'm interested to know, how did you find the culture?
Yeah, well, I was in HP at the time, and I will say that I absolutely loved my 14 years at HP. I think of it nothing but fond memories and experiences, and I'll forever be grateful
for that. Were the best when you were working for me?
Yes, of course.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. I think, well, if you don't mind me saying, you only had one female on your leadership team at the time, which was Jane Gambarini. So
sorry, I shouldn't laugh.
Oh, no,
but I shouldn't laugh.
But it was. I know, but that was pretty standard at that time.
Jane, if you're watching this, Jane was very, very good.
She was brilliant, and she was someone that I didn't really have much interaction with, but certainly someone that I looked up to and that I aspired to, potentially
right. She was outstanding, was Jane.
Yeah, she was, and she wouldn't tolerate any of the shit either. And I think I respected her for that. She was not a alpha female in that regard. She still had some femininity about her, but she wouldn't take any of the crap. And I'm sure in that leadership team there was some, stuff that she had to deal with, and I could.
She was tough, and it's just worth dwelling on that. I mean, Jane went out to Dubai and chose a different career path. If she'd have chosen to stay with tech, I think she could have gone right to the top. Yeah. You're absolutely right. You didn't have to alpha male the males to be good. She played to her own strengths. Yeah. It was a tough environment. I remember you said to me once, Pip, that you found me intimidating back then.
I did. Yeah.
Because you see, I can joke about it. I don't find that, to me, that's terrible. Is that because I don't believe in that as a management and leadership style at all. But why did you?
Yeah. You had a very fierce reputation in HP in those early days. And I will just say about Jane before we move on there, that is an important point to note, that as a senior female leader, the amount of influence you have on people that you don't actually know really exists. And I'm not taking anything away from Jane there, but she probably doesn't know who I am. But she was a massive inspiration to me, even if I wasn't working for her directly or indirectly. Yeah. So I think as women, we have important parts to play in role modelling, even when we don't necessarily realise we're doing so. Yeah. But on the intimidation piece, I think it was just like, I think you were great fun, and people knew that they could get a straight answer from you, but you were firm. Like you also knew where the line was with you, and at the end of the day, everybody knew that they had to deliver for you, and so the intimidation was more around. I didn't feel scared of you per se, but it was more about, if I don't deliver, I know what's going to happen here. Like I'm absolutely transparent in the objectives and my obligations in the small part that I play in your big organisation. And I remember one kickoff that you had with. Paul Patterson was also someone who, I was intimidated by.
Well,
you and Paul.
I was the cuddly bear. Paul walked in like a policeman, didn't he?
Yeah, there was you, Paul, and then Pete Murray, who was kind of in the middle of the two of you. It was really.
Pete was sensible.
Pete was
was sensible. I know I had a bit of a bit of a wild side, which occasionally came out.
No comment. But I remember this kickoff you had where it was like you and Paul facing off to each other in a kind of mastermind scenario. And then, do you remember that?
Yeah,
and it was
I
like
did.
the heads of.
Was that in Celtic Manor or something?
I don't remember now, but it was like, I just loved it. I was like, I love it. And
Humour's always been important to me.
Yeah.
But I do think work is a serious thing. And if you come into sales, I always used to set the bar higher for I was more demanding of people in the sales profession because if you get it right, you earn
wanted the
big
best.
sums of
Yeah,
money.
yeah, exactly.
And I want the best. And if sorry, this isn't going to be an easy job for you. You know, there's an awful lot of other people's jobs depending on your success as a seller. And to this day, I still don't think you can be successful at selling year in, year out unless you graft.
Yeah.
Graft.
No,
So I
absolutely.
don't apologise for that. But the thought of, I suppose you're in your 20s. What was I? In my 40s.
Yeah.
If I look back to my 20s, the people in their 40s were a bit scary. But you want, I'm sure you feel the same. You want respect rather than affection, don't you?
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I like, as I say, I found it really inspiring. So don't be concerned that I was running off in a corner shivering. It's like the healthy level of kind of fear.
I used to bump into you. I remember I got clear memories of you, and you were no shrinking violet, I have to say. You could look after yourself in that environment very, very well. But HP was a great company. I don't want to talk about where I think HP went wrong, but I do think if it had made different strategic choices, it could have basically been a bigger leader in the world of public cloud than it is. But let's not go there. I got fantastic memories of HP as well.
I remember doing a role play with you in that sales school piece, and you walked out on me. So you were the customer, and I was having to kind of
remember it.
Yeah, and you basically just said this isn't good enough and walked out. And I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to get fired now then, isn't it? But you were basically simulating what certain customers might do. But
exactly. It's not a walk. Are you tough enough for this game?
I know.
Are you resilient
I think
enough?
I went after you and got you back in the room.
No, I remember you went off and had, because you're a mum as well, which we should talk about, how to be a successful business woman and a mum. We'll come on to that. But I do remember when you, and I think this sums up because you're beautifully direct, which I loved. And I remember when I think it was Richard Masterson gave you your first management job.
He did, yeah.
And after you got the job, I was sitting in Wood Street in the HP London office at the time. And after you got the job, you came in, knocked on the door, walked in, and I think the words were, "Hi, Martin," or Hesse, or whatever. Apparently you don't think I should have got this job. Is that right? And I'm thinking, whoa.
Yeah, I do remember that. Yeah.
But well done, because I'll be honest with you, I didn't think you'd had enough experience at the time. But goodness me, did you prove me wrong?
Yeah.
Absolutely knocked it out of the park.
Yeah, I do.
So going into management and leadership positions, when did that sort of?
Yeah.
Tell me your thinking there, because you could have. You can go through your whole of your career as a very successful seller, can't you? And a lot of people have done.
Yeah, and I think it was accidental per the discussion we just had about me getting into sales in the first place. Again, through I'll admit lack of sort of thinking I had the capability. Basically. Richard said, I think you should do this. I think you've got the competency, the wherewithal. I think you can stretch yourself into this role. And then as soon as he said that, I became absolutely determined.
Well done, Richard.
Determined to,
Plug for Richard Masterson.
Yeah, no, absolutely. He was a great advocate and supporter of mine and certainly pushed me into a role. And then that was like, I was like, this has been missing. I absolutely loved it. I mean, it was at the time when we did a lot of restructuring in HP. So it was a very, and Nick Wilson was our MD, and you were kind of transitioning into the EMEA role. Yeah. So there was a lot of change internally. And I think I had something like 23 direct reports, and it was all a bit for my first manager job. And we were restructuring, which we all know what that code word is really all about. So it was quite a difficult time.
Baptism of fire.
Do you know what, though? I would not have changed those 2 years because I learned so much. I had to learn myself, and I had to go and reconnect with my network and do a lot of self-learning on the reading books and just trying to think about how do I show up as a leader. So, I'm not professing I got it all right. There were some regrets through that time. But I think sometimes you have to go through those experiences to be a better person, a better leader.
Yeah. Do you want to put any more colour on what you got right, what you got wrong?
Yeah, I think I made decisions on people too quickly. I think I assumed the wrong out of some people that I shouldn't have done. I should have. And, sales is always difficult because you don't have time. You know that. You've got to deliver the months, you've got to deliver the quarter, especially in a public-facing company, but it's just as pressurised in private equity. I'll confirm that. You want the time, but you don't have the time. You have to make quick decisions. I think I sometimes had a bias to decision making that I shouldn't have had on a few people, and I regret that to some extent. But it has made me very much more conscious in my future leadership roles.
Yeah, sadly, towards the latter end of my and your career in HP, it was tough because and there was a lot of reducing headcount, redundancy programs. It was a tough environment. What did you like about being in management and a leadership position?
I think honestly, without being a cheese bag, it's about helping people and seeing them progress and seeing them develop and knowing that you're adding some value. If I think about some of the people that we've mentioned just now in terms of helping me, even without necessarily realizing it, just being that role model, supporting people in their own journey and trying to be there to sort of have those open discussions and debates and guide people as best you can. I think I really enjoyed that. And then the learning element for me, like I've said before, I love learning and putting myself out of my comfort zone and taking chances. And that I definitely felt like I was sort of
would you say going from HP to Salesforce was an example of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you mentioned, you touched on, like, we don't want to get into bashing any companies, and I have nothing but affection for HP, but I did feel like we were very slow in the adoption of cloud, and I wanted to get into either a cloud motion or a SaaS motion. And so, when Salesforce came knocking, they have such an amazing reputation and brand in the SaaS. I mean, they essentially invented SaaS. Did, and I had some friends that worked there that spoke very highly of the learning journey. As much about progression, I wanted to continue to learn. And they said that they were kind of anchored on both elements, which were important to me. So I sort of took the opportunity, really, to go there.
You rose very quickly through Salesforce, didn't you?
Yeah, I was hired, but again, we'll talk about people that are influencers. Like Chris Ciari hired me, who at the time was running EMEA, and he's still a great friend of mine and was such a strong advocate for me. And I think, after the first year, he promoted me into an EMEA role. That was great experience for me. Yeah. And then the business restructured and I took on more responsibility in the UK under Paul Smith, who's now the CRO at ServiceNow, and again, a great leader, someone who I have a huge amount of respect for. So, yeah, I mean, I've been given...
That culture at Salesforce obviously worked for you.
It did.
Even if I always think if you're very good, but you're in the wrong culture that suits your style, friction, you can't always basically perform, and it doesn't work. And I could point to examples, but this obviously, the glove fitted really well for you at Salesforce.
Yeah, I mean, they were, again, very focused on numbers and delivery, like make no...
And you like that?
I like that, yeah, because I want to be held accountable. That's an important, and I want to hold others accountable.
That shines through on your LinkedIn, by the way, accountability.
Yeah.
You talk about it a lot.
Yeah.
So you like being on a number.
I do. Yeah, because I find it otherwise a little bit like, how can I anchor myself against the target? I find it, I've never been particularly keen on taking overlay roles or kind of sideline roles, just because I want the pressure, I want the accountability.
By the way, I think that differentiates. A lot of people think selling's easy, don't they, when they're not in a sales role? Oh, I could do that. But then they get a number on their head, and the world changes, and you've got to be able to cope with that number, haven't you?
It's a lot of pressure as well, I think, and there's nowhere to hide. I mean, I think that's probably, for anybody watching this that isn't in sales, there is no hiding place in sales. It's really, you're either on it or you're not.
I spoke to one or two people who I knew in Salesforce at the time who worked with you, and they really sung your praises about your leadership style, which seemed to be, for somebody who's driven by numbers, it was very people-centric, actually.
Yeah.
So it strikes me that you've you've got that blend of task and people. Would you see yourself that way as well?
I try to be. I think you either love a job or hate a job, depending on who you work for, and therefore you give all or you don't give anything, depending on who you. I'm really black and white like that. I think if you want to deliver, you deliver because you have faith and belief in your boss, and they're creating an environment where you feel safe and you can do your best work. If you create an environment that isn't safe and where you can learn and develop, you're not going to get the best out of your people. So I do focus. I think culture and numbers are hand in hand. Honestly, I do. I don't think you can have a toxic, shitty culture and deliver a exceptional, continued set of results.
I totally agree. I mean, that's a great example in my career was a company called Sequent that was bought by IBM, which was a very hard sales-driven, but a very people-centric culture, strong buddying system, very good onboarding system, wasn't revolving door, but basically, it becomes a virtuous circle because it attracts the right talent, doesn't it?
No, totally. Yeah, I mean, and retains them as well, right? Because you want to stay in environments where you feel like you're happier and doing great work, and you don't want to stay in toxic environments. So it's really, for me, it's pretty simple.
So you were doing brilliantly. You were heading to take over from Benioff, or I don't know.
Not quite sure about that. But
And then you went to Google. I mean, So what was your thinking there?
Well, that was Chris, actually. So I've mentioned Chris Ciari, who he left Salesforce to go and be the VP of EMEA in Google, and basically was pretty compelling about the need for me to go and support him in the UK role. And so, I mean, it was at the height of COVID, and I don't have any regrets about going to work for Chris and Google. I do probably have some regrets about the timing and, leaving when we're in like intense lockdown and not being able to meet my team. It was very hard. And I'd also gone through some personal challenges at home I'd lost my dad and I'd lost my brother, and I wasn't mentally in a good place. And so I made that decision not really thinking things through clearly. Now, don't get me wrong, the team at Google were fantastic. The product is exceptional. The innovation there is like nothing you've ever seen.
I think they'll do quite well as a company, don't you?
Yeah. But in terms of like, if you were to say, was that my best move? Probably personally, I think I made a bit of a decision too quickly, and it was anchored very much on Chris. No regrets about that.
You probably learned it. And I've made a similar bad decision. You learn a lot about yourself.
Yeah, you do.
What's right for you.
What's right and what's wrong. You're right. You quickly realise what is important to you, what you value, and what is sort of not good for you in terms of how you show up at work.
And then you went back to sales.
Yeah, so I had stayed in touch with obviously people at Salesforce, and they announced the acquisition of Slack, I think, as I was in Google, and then they wanted somebody to come and run the sort of integration of Slack as they acquired, but they wanted someone that had a Salesforce background and experience. So it was kind of perfect fit for me, really. And I actually joined Slack before I joined Slack. So I signed a contract with Slack, and I was an employee of Slack's for a couple of months, and then I transitioned over and became an employee again of Salesforce. And that was a kind of 2-year project. Integrate Slack into Salesforce, get the machine humming.
Big job, and
yeah. I mean, I learned a lot there. It's a very product-led growth strategy in Slack. Amazing product. I miss it every day because I don't work on it anymore. But and a fantastic set of people, and the founder Stuart, amazing sort of visionary. So I learned loads there, and obviously it was the second largest acquisition in tech history. So like integrating that into already a very big organisation, there was lots of learnings there.
So let's look at sort of culture then, and the sort of culture that you always. What's the culture you try and engender in businesses that you lead? Yeah,
I think creating a safe space in an organisation like sales is very important, but not to the point where you can't be off your numbers. So it's like that balance. And I always describe myself, and maybe people that like me or don't like me might disagree, but I always think I'm firm but very fair. And I'm always of the belief that we should be transparent. So a culture of transparency where you can. Obviously, there are some things as you get more senior that you can't expose, but I think transparency engenders trust. And
Yeah.
trust in sales is so important because, you can always be sort of slightly looking over your shoulder and slightly paranoid about whether you're next on the chopping block. We are primarily governed by what we deliver. So, yeah, trust, transparency, safe space. And then I would say, just like, we've got to have fun. It's intense, it's hard work, it's relentless.
Yeah.
There has to be some fun and joy, because we spend more time at work than we do.
Yeah.
Rightly or wrongly.
So let's. I mean, I'm unpick that a little bit, Pip. So, what does safe space mean?
I think you're okay to make some mistakes and you're not going to get executed on day one. I think if you continue to make mistakes, it's understanding and being transparent that can't continue. So
not a blame culture.
Not a blame culture. And then I think being allowed to voice an opinion, when it's not necessarily, something that people would say is corporate, like being able to sort of say I don't agree and not being reprimanded for that or kind of looked at differently. Having the opportunity to have a voice, I think, is important.
Transparency. What does that mean?
So I'll give you a sort of example of that. When I joined Salesforce, there was the particular team that I was running. There was a lot of there'd been a lot of leadership changes, and there was a lot of restructure that was happening in closed doors. And actually, I joined Salesforce and was given my own office, like like this sort of room. And I was like,
did you have your name on the front door?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
And I was like, I don't want that. I want to sit on the sales floor with everybody else. And there was like, no, you can't do that. You've got an office. And I was like, no, I want to
I'm
sit
surprised that Salesforce did that.
Yeah, I don't think they do it anymore, by the way. So, but at the time, that's what happened. I sat on the sales floor and I was very transparent about, we did communications around everything. Like, if we're going to do a restructure, we're going to share our proposal with you first before we implement it. And we're going to take input and we're going to take feedback and we're going to take we're going to listen to your voice rather than just do something to you that you don't like. You don't feel like you've been part of that experience. You don't feel like you've had your voice heard. Now, the outcome might be the same, but people need to feel like they've got skin in the game and they've had an ability to sort of voice their concerns and be part of that journey. It may take you a week or two longer, but you've got them then. You've got the team with you. Versus, I'm doing this to you whether you like it or not, and I'm sat in my little box making those decisions myself. So that's just one example.
People respect you more. I mean, it's the old.
I hope so.
Don't treat them like mushrooms. Keep them in the dark and feed them shite.
You wouldn't want to be treated like that, Martin, and I wouldn't. So I don't see why.
I'm totally the same. Totally the same as you. You have mentioned authenticity because that's always been. But I've always had the feeling that you're very authentic, and I always like to think I've been authentic. I've always thought I'm not just going to deliver the corporate line because.
No.
I want to put my own view on it, so it's the authentic me talking. I mean,
I'm very much about that, I would say. I mean, obviously, I'm talking about myself, so you always have a bias to how you think you show up. So maybe we'll ask the audience, but I always want to be who I am. I actually find it very hard.
So basically, if you're listening to this podcast, reply: do you think Pip's authentic?
Yeah.
And do you think Hess is authentic?
Yeah.
Or maybe you think we're all
full of shit.
We're all bullshitters. Yeah.
Let's hope not. But yeah, I mean, straight talking, say it how it is. I don't want to I can't show up as someone that I'm not, though. I think that's the problem. So it's just being about who you are. Because people will respect that more than you trying to be someone that you're not.
It's less stressful as well.
Yeah, because you can't remember, can't you? I'm getting older. Exactly. I can't remember.
It's less stressful, and it obviously works though as a leadership style. You got some very nice I know you manipulate your LinkedIn up to a point, but you got some great endorsements. Not you. You wouldn't do that, but you got some very strong endorsements, and you talk a lot about the things you've just talked about on your LinkedIn. Are you a good hirer of people?
Yes, I think so. I think I've learned that. I don't think that's something that came naturally to me overnight. I think as you sort of go through your leadership journey and experiences, you know the bullshit. More so than perhaps earlier in your leadership career where people can talk the talk, but you can sort of scratch under the surface and realise.
Sellers are usually pretty good at interviews, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. Yeah, they are. And I've definitely made some mishires. I've hired people that look exactly like myself, and because you have a bias to want... We
have that bias.
Yeah.
Actually, I don't think leaders, I don't think we put enough time into the hiring bit,
I agree.
And I work with a recruitment search business, so I see it as one of the things I do. And it's like, I'll squeeze an interview in, do it at the end of the day. Oh, haven't read the CV. And
I know.
And actually, we're really, for what's such an important part of leadership, isn't it? Which is getting the right team. I think most don't treat it with the respect that they need, because actually it's probably the most important thing you do.
Oh, totally. If you don't have the right team around you, you're not going to be.
How long do you give a seller or a sales manager? How long would you give them from a performance point of view, or is that just too bland a question?
I think performance is one thing, but I think you can tell within 3 months if they've got the right attitude, behaviours, characteristics, values to deliver for you. Like if they're on their number but they're absolutely hateful to their team and just turning up like a terrorist, then that's a real problem, isn't it? Like, delivering numbers, but like everything else is terrible. They're creating a culture of like uncertainty, fear, and doubt. I would have a big red flag over that. And, obviously you'd have a conversation to say, great on the numbers, but like, I need you to show up well in terms of the softer
once
skills.
Again, Pip, I totally agree with you. I didn't think I'd be agreeing with you so much, actually. Yeah. But in sales, you can say, have you hit your number? That's enough. No, I like measuring the inputs. How are you going about your job? What are you doing to achieve that success? Because if you're doing the right things and you've got the opportunity, the success will follow. If you're not doing the right things, you might just have got lucky. Yeah. And there are lucky. You got lucky for a quarter because you walked onto that big deal. Yeah. And you're absolutely right. If you're trying to create the right culture, you've got to do it in the right way, haven't you?
Yeah, absolutely. It's got to be sustainable for long-term growth. And I think that's what most organisations should strive for. I don't think all of them do, but I think that's it's very short-term tactical if you're just thinking about a quarter delivery and results, but not the long-term game, particularly in sales, because it's a people game.
Yeah. That's one of the tests is, when I'm interviewing somebody, would I buy from you? Because if I wouldn't buy from you, who the hell's going to buy from you?
Yeah, exactly.
Let's just turn a bit as we come towards the end of the chat about you as a mum and you as a woman in IT. Let's perhaps probably combine the two, really. You talked about I only had one woman in a leadership position.
You feeling okay about that?
Well, I actually really like working with women. I'll put it out there. I really like the gender balance, but I've never gone out of my way to contrive it that way.
Yeah.
And the challenge we had back then was there wasn't enough.
There weren't
enough talented women coming through.
Yeah.
Because the industry didn't attract them. Yeah. I'm not saying they weren't out there. Of course they're out there. There are loads in marketing and HR, but coming through
a hard career for
sales, maybe that's different now. But so what's it? And then we get the groups of women in IT and what have you. Tell me what it's like to be a woman in tech and these days.
I think it's gone backwards a little bit post-COVID. I do, unfortunately. I think. And actually, as I was walking over to see you today, I was reading that interview that Mark Zuckerberg gave on, we need more masculine energy in tech organizations, which, honestly, like, it's fucking ridiculous, right? So, back
to the Wild West of the 80s.
Yeah, and you're seeing, like, a lot of big organizations, we won't name names, like divesting in DEI projects. Like, now I know some of those that were kind of tick box exercises, and I'm not for any of that kind of nonsense. But at the same time, it is super important to have representation. And it still is hard. There is still this bro culture, like, whether we like it or not, it's hard as a woman. And I will speak like I'm in my late 40s. I have, gone through the whole journey as a woman, like from being single to being with somebody to us having children, to now coming into the sort of menopause part of my life. Like, that's not a topic that anybody likes to talk about, by the way, especially not myself. But all of these things are really hard things to grapple with. I came back after my second baby at HP. I had 2 children under 2 and a full-time job, and I was travelling, commuting from Bracknell to Cheshire. It was fucking terrible.
You must have had support at home.
Yeah,
so
Dave and I have been together for nearly 30 years, and he gave up work to support me. Like, that was a big decision.
That's the biggest shout out of the lot, isn't it, for Dave?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Dave, if I could not have done this without his support, for sure. But a lot of women aren't in that luxurious position of having a partner who wants to do that, is willing to do that, all sorts of complexities, single mums out there who are doing it all themselves. it's really hard. And you know, I'm not sure that it's really got any better in the sort of last 5 years, certainly since COVID. I think.
Who have you? You know, you talked about people that have helped you on your way. Do you look up to any particular female execs in the industry or other industries, or because people will be looking up to you, won't they? I mean,
I'd say more my peer group of people, people that I know that are doing what I'm doing themselves. You know, that are working hard, balancing a family, juggling, their own personal kind of changes and challenges, and still trying to build a great career and deliver and execute, and juggling home and family and work. It's really hard. So my peer group of and I have a fantastic friendship group of people that I've grown up, from HP days, Salesforce, Google. Like, those are the people that I respect, that are in the trenches doing the hard yards. They're the people I look up to.
Yeah, and it's a very the male. I think it's great to have a balance. If it's too many men, it gets very, very the old testosterone.
It's very
really,
toxic. Yeah, it's not nice.
Well, I wouldn't use the word toxic, maybe because I'm a man myself. But we ended up talking about different things. What's the language we talk about? Footy or mule or cars or
on the golf course. You go for
or
around
on the golf course.
Yeah.
And then if you have too many women, I think there's negative. I think it can be a negative culture
I'm
that way
not
as well.
into all of that, bra bashing and all that crap. I'm not into the whole. I think there is a balance, and I like the fact that you can. I like working environments where there's a balance of both, because I'm not a out and out girly girl. I love football for a start, and I love sport, and I like fast cars, and I like things that don't fit into a stereotype.
But there are, and I think men, even in this world where I think the role of the father is fundamentally changed in the last 30 years in terms of involvement with children.
Yeah.
I still think it's harder for women to basically have that. That high-powered career than it is for men. Now, I'm sure people will basically write in and say, well, that's not the case with me. But I think generally speaking, it is tougher.
I mean, I've turned down lots of opportunities.
We have babies for a start.
Well, yeah, and physically it's hard.
Emotionally,
mentally it's hard, especially as you get into sort of further in your 40s. It's like there's all sorts of stuff that you're dealing with personally in terms of your own body changes. And then also you have I've turned down roles where like at HP, I was asked to go and work in the US for Meg, and I had 2 young children, and that was massive upheaval, and I just didn't want to do that. I'm not sure if it was a man, would it be a different discussion or debate or conversation? I don't know. I'm not here to suggest it
didn't work for you. I never fancied it, to be honest.
No.
But I was never invited to work for Meg. But you know what? I couldn't have done those sort of jobs. They weren't for me. I sort of like being in charge, really. But I also think one of the reasons that men, there are probably more men in those corporate roles, is I wonder, is that big corporate sort of ego-driven hierarchical thing? Does it sort of play to the male more than the female?
Yeah.
Then you look at the world of startups, and so many women are actually incredibly successful entrepreneurs with startups. Does that environment better suit the?
I agree.
So
I think in the larger tech organisations, it's still very at a senior level. It's still very dominant by male, and a lot of the decision making for promotion and progression is around your political relationships, and rather than of course you need to deliver, but it's around the relationships that you have. And typically males have better relationships with males in the sort of political environment.
Do you think so?
Yeah, I do. I've seen it happen time and time again.
You see, once again, I see it as a bloke, and you see it as a woman. I love basically sponsoring. Female. Well, do I prefer doing it to female talent than the male talent? Yeah, maybe I do actually, but it's. But you obviously feel it. You feel there's still very much
I do.
A boys' club.
Yeah, I do. Unfortunately, and not everywhere, and not with every leader, because I'm sure I'd upset some leaders who think they don't have that.
We're keeping everything anonymous.
Yeah,
here,
exactly.
aren't we?
But I definitely I definitely see it. Yeah, I definitely see
You go
it.
back to the early stage of my career, there were some dreadful cases
Yeah.
of sexual intimidation
Yeah.
of women, which was pretty abhorrent. Actually,
Yeah.
I'd like to think that's pretty much completely gone from our workplace. No,
I don't think so.
Really?
Yeah, I don't. I don't think it has completely gone. No, no. I think there's probably less of a tolerance than there were when you and I, certainly when I started my career, and probably definitely for sure when, no disrespect, Martin, but you're a bit older than me, when you started your
I
career.
predate
But
the PC.
yeah, but I don't think it's.
Sorry, the PC, not predate political correctness, but I predate that as well.
Yeah. But I think there's still unfortunately some sprinklings of it out
Well,
there.
this is an eye-opener, you see. But you've done all right out of it, Pip, haven't you?
Yeah,
So-
but it's been hard, It's not easy to navigate, but it's I've enjoyed it nonetheless.
Do you prefer managing men or women?
That's a good question. I think, unfortunately, rightly or wrongly, I've managed more men than I've managed women. So I've probably got more experience of managing men than women. I'm not sure I enjoy them less or more. I would say it's about equal. If anything, I have more empathy for particularly women that have got families or children.
Yeah.
I just have more because I've got a bias to know what that looks like and how difficult that can be. Yeah.
So, coming to the end of our chat, which
Yeah.
I've thoroughly enjoyed, but you're still young. You're not like
Not quite. But
yeah, me. I'm doing podcasts now.
I know, it's great. It's great.
So tell me where was the ambition? Because you are ambitious. Clearly, you've been
Yeah.
ambitious, and there's nothing wrong with ambition.
No.
You've been ambitious. You've always been very driven.
Yeah.
Taking your career very seriously. I think you've invested in relationships as well. I think probably far better than I ever did. What's next? Where do you see yourself in the 5 years time?
I've always been amazed at how much I've achieved, if I'm being honest. Wasn't particularly great at school. Like I say, I wasn't academic. If you were not the top of class, you weren't really considered to be of much interest in an all-girls boarding school. I was extremely sporty. And I think that had actually quite a damaging effect on my confidence.
Yeah, I bet.
And I think it still correlates now to my incessant need to learn. Like I feel like I'm supplementing some kind of.
It's very narrow, isn't it?
Yeah,
School in terms
it
of
is.
what you measure as successful.
I talk to my kids about it all the time.
Yeah,
I'm like, it's so much more than your
I agree
grades.
with you totally.
Yeah,
I
but
totally
at the time
agree.
it was so black and white for us at school.
We haven't answered it though. We're 5 years time.
So my
when I'm in
honest answer is I want to see how far I can go. Like without being a cheese bag, let's just see how far I can go. Like CRO, CSO, CEO. Why not? Why can't I do those things?
Yeah. So the ambition is still there.
Yeah.
Get to CEO or beyond. And,
Yeah. Why not?
Yeah.
Why
Because
not?
you are up there, I think, with not a huge group of women who've done phenomenally well at the top of the UK tech industry.
That woman that walked in and said, "You don't believe that I could be a manager, Martin? Have you changed your mind now?"
Clearly, question. It's maybe self-doubt my judgment.
Good.
No, but I'd like to think I've been firm and fair. Somebody used that about me, and I do quite like straight talking.
Yeah.
Actually,
Yeah.
it's very easy. It's very easy to deal with straight talking,
It is,
isn't it?
Yeah, you know where you stand.
I don't like people talking in riddles.
Me neither.
Let's be clear. So,
Yeah.
Robert, I think we've come to the end of our
I've
chat.
enjoyed it.
I've really enjoyed it. Well done, you. I'm
Thank you.
think you're.
Well, thank you. You've been a big part of my influence.
I was the guy intimidated you back in the 20s. Well done, and I look forward to keeping in touch and following your career.
Thanks, Martin. Appreciate it.
Cheers, Pip.